Welcome to What America's Thinking, where we discuss key elections, demographic trends, and public opinion. I'm Raphael Warnock. I'm flying solo today. My co-host Julia Manchester will be back next week. Until then, let's get back into today's top headlines. The Georgia Senate runoff race between sitting Senator Raphael Warnock and Republican challenger Herschel Walker is fast approaching. Voters will hit the polls once again next Tuesday, December 6th. And that election went into a second round after each candidate failed to get 50% of the vote. The race is tight, but Warnock is edging Walker by 2 percentage points. According to an Emerson College poll released this week, Warnock got 49% support, while Walker got 47%. When undecided voters were thrown into the mix, Warnock's lead widened. 51% of voters leaned toward Warnock, 49% favored Walker. Regardless of how they plan to vote, a majority of voters in Georgia expect Warnock to prevail. Here to discuss the detail of what's happening in the Peach State is the director of Emerson College Polling, Spencer Kimball. Our favorite guest, Spencer, welcome back.
Thanks for having me.
So this race is tighter than one would expect for a runoff where really the incumbent seemed to come out on top, clearly, if by a narrow margin. Why is this race so tight again?
Well, it looks like in that initial race, Raphael Warnock wins by a point. And then the conventional wisdom was, after the Democrats took control of the Senate by winning Nevada and Pennsylvania, that there would be kind of a movement towards the Democrats. But our polling is suggesting still a tight race in Georgia, very competitive, though it does lean towards Warnock slightly more than it did a month ago.
So are you surprised that Herschel Walker is still strong? He had a lot of negatives during regular campaigning, and even more issues have come out, like his residence in Texas. He keeps getting hit, but he won't go down.
Exactly. It seems that Walker has taken his hits, but remember, he got 48% of that vote, 48.5% of the vote in the general election. So he's still right up there, and you're seeing the Democrats continuing to attack because they see it as a competitive race. With that said, though, he did come up short. He is able to hold his base vote of males and of older voters, those over the age of 50, but they're really struggling with overeducated voters. Those with postgraduate degrees really are turning away from Walker in big numbers.
Now, the age issue has come up a lot in this race, as in races throughout the country. I've read several groups telling us that younger voters are coming out to vote early in droves. I said earlier, that this election is going to take place on Tuesday the 6th. It's already taking place. Some people say more than 1 million young voters have already voted in Georgia. Is this changing the dynamics at all?
Well, if that young vote does come out at a higher propensity than normal, that's very good news for Warnock. He leads, particularly amongst 18 to 29-year-olds, by nearly 25 points. It drops down as we get to the 40-year-olds, but he still leads that group of those under 50 with about 55% of the vote. So it is a key voting constituent for him to get out, and if those numbers are accurate, that will put him in a really strong place come Tuesday.
So you mentioned that big base that Walker still has. Is this race essentially about the base, or is it still about the candidates?
Yeah, it's interesting because when we take a look at the issues, yes, the economy is still the top issue at 42%, but then we start to see a splattering of issues that the Democrats do very well in, including threats to democracy, abortion access, health care. And when you start adding it up, it looks like the Democrats have about 50% of the issues and the Republicans have close to about 50% when you combine, let's say, economy, crime, and immigration. So when we start looking at those issues, it seems to be more split in the Peachtree State, and that's what explains why it's such a competitive race.
And the second round of voting sometimes brings new issues to the table or gets more hyper-local. We had national political attention in November on the election all over the country, on the midterms. Have the issues changed at all since the general election?
Well, as far as like the pocketbook issues, I would say no. But as far as the political issues, I do think that we have a lot at stake here in Georgia, particularly for Donald Trump. His candidate is Herschel Walker. Some of the Trump candidates in 2022 did not run well and lost. And so he is looking to have a win himself with Walker and be able to, kind of propel his presidential aspirations again. On the flip side, if Walker was to fall short, that could have detrimental effect towards Trump and maybe give a candidate like Governor Ron DeSantis a boost in the polls. So there's going to be some inner political fighting going on, but obviously we have national issues as well at stake.
So former President Trump, always a figure, or well, at least in the last 6 years, a central political figure. Julie and I, last episode, we were discussing whether he would show up in Georgia. Now it looks like he won't show up to support Walker. Do you think that's the best for Walker's candidacy, for Trump to stay away, or would he be boosted if Trump showed up?
I think strategically, it's a good move for Walker not to bring Trump in. When we did the ballot test in this recent poll, when we looked at Trump versus Biden or DeSantis versus Biden, it's almost a 4 or 5 point benefit for DeSantis versus Trump versus Biden. So you can see that there's a lot of angst against Trump in Georgia. We don't forget about the primary where Perdue lost to Kemp by 50 points. That was one of the biggest primary losses for Trump as well. So not a surprise that he's not coming to Georgia, but that really hurts the Trump candidacy moving forward, because this could be a state that the Republicans would need to take back the White House. And if they don't think that Donald Trump could win this state, then what type of candidacy would he be, or nominee would he be for president?
Yeah, that makes it tough for him to look into the future. On the Democratic side, we were talking way back in early November about Herschel Walker's campaign if the Democrats kept the Senate seat in Nevada or they didn't. But they did. The Democrats have a majority because of the tie-breaking vote that Vice President Harris holds. But is it a case of now Raphael Warnock essentially campaigning against Manchin and Sinema, the Democratic senators who sometimes flirt with the right, or is it a case of Warnock still punching at Herschel Walker?
Yeah, I think you've got kind of both of those dynamics in play. And so for the Democrats, they're saying, well, really, how important is this race? We already have the Senate. But the Democrats know that having the Senate by a tie-breaking vote from the vice president doesn't give them the type of political capital they need to push an agenda or legislation. So every Senate seat's important. Remember that, there'll be 33 seats up in 2024. So it's whatever you can get today, you better hold on to. So it looks like Warnock is giving them the full shot. The Democrats are certainly on the ground pulling out their vote. We'll see what happens on Election Day, but it looks like a battle still in Georgia.
Yeah, and remember, 51 seats means that you get a lot more seats in committees than you do with 50 seats. You just mentioned this. This is interesting. The Senate calendar for 2024 and 2026 looks pretty dangerous for the Democrats. How much will this race, cushion them for the upcoming uphill battles, plural, that they have to face?
Well, certainly. I mean, the three names that you just mentioned, Sinema, Tester, and Manchin, they're all up for re-elect in 2024. So they're constantly looking at what's happening in the field. Having any of these seats is going to be important. And that's why both sides are still competing very hard, spending a lot of money in Georgia.
So overall, what do you think of the results are going to be? What is it looking like? Is Warnock ahead?
Yeah, it looks like he's been able to hold his vote, particularly amongst the black vote and the Hispanic vote. The white vote's going to break 35 to 40 points for Walker, but it depends on the turnout. If we see what we saw out of Atlanta, that's going to be a strong sign for Warnock. If those numbers were to slip, I think the Walker team is right in place to be able to pull off an upset. With that said, the majority of people think that Warnock is going to win. 57% when asked, regardless of who you're voting for, who do you think is going to win, go with Warnock. A month ago, it was split 50-50. So at least perceptually, people think that Warnock is going to take this. It would be an upset in their minds if Walker pulled it off on Tuesday.
How much does that generally affect voting behavior? Does it usually excite the, is it more likely to excite Walker's base to say like, oh, we need to stage a comeback, or is it more likely to depress that base? This is done for.
Yes, well, that's the big question. That's what we're looking for on Tuesday. does the bottom drop out for Walker, and does he lose by 4 or 5 points, and Warnock exceeds his poll expectation, or does it rally the base? It's the constant theory of the David versus Goliath. Do we root for David, or the underdog, or do we then root for Goliath and have what we call the bandwagon effect occur? So both are going to be in play, and that's what we're looking for in those vote totals.
One last thing, we saw in Georgia, we saw a lot of ticket splitting, people voting for Republican Governor Kemp for re-election and voting for Democratic Senator Raphael Warnock for re-election. Do we have any data to sense how these ticket splitters will behave? Are they going to come back out and vote just for a Democrat this time?
Yeah, so as you mentioned, there was almost 7% of the electorate split their vote between a Republican governor and a Democratic senator. We also see, the question is, will they come out and do that again? There was also a libertarian on the ballot who took almost 2% of the vote. That vote looks to be sitting on the sideline as well. So it would be interesting, and to your point, do these votes actually come out, or do they say, my candidate's no longer in the race, I don't really like the other two? And that's what the campaigns are trying to motivate those voters to the polls. Generally, there's less votes that come out in the runoff than in the general, and we'll see which side has more melt.
Well, I guess we're going to have to wait till after Tuesday to see how this all turns out. We'll have a lot to analyze after then. Spencer, thank you so much for being with us again.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
All right, thanks for watching. And now we know a little bit more about what America, specifically Georgia, is thinking. We'll see you next time. I'm Raphael Warnock.